Dear God, thank you for the blessings of the Sabbath that we've had. Thank you for a new week, and thank you for the opportunity that we can meet together. I pray and ask that you may be with us as we try to understand you better. Um, and I pray that as we try and answer questions about where we are at the end of the world, you may guide us in the right direction. I pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen. So just to give a recap of what we had gone over last week, there were two separate presentations, and I guess my recap will be focused on the first one really because we didn't have the opportunity to go into a lot of detail with the second one. Um, but in those studies, they were centered around the image of the beast. Um, and it was this concept of an image created in this two-step process. An image is created, whether you're looking at the papacy in the beast in Revelation 13 or the image of the beast. There's a creation, and then that creation is given life. And then I went into history and tried to demonstrate that 533 and 538 are really the same event, but there's differences in what they achieved. In 533, with Justinian's decree, Justinian is going to make the Pope the head of all churches, and so now the state is going to give their arms to the Pope, make the Pope the head of all churches, but in 538, that's going to be enforced. So that beast is created when Justinian gives their decree. Um, the combination of church and state that we speak about with regards to the papacy is created. But that creation couldn't do anything until 538 when the Ostrogoths are removed from Italy. The Pope couldn't rule. And so when the Ostrogoths are removed, that's the power or life that's given to this beast that's been created. Um, and so from that, we went to, or I touched on the fact that you can take those three steps in those first 10 verses: power, authority, and a seat. And you can tell a story in that way by breaking them up into three different events between the 300s and the 500s. Or you can tell a different story, which I'm suggesting is this story of an image the beast created and then given the ability to rule, and that ability is then the 1260, where it's going to do the works of the papacy, the first beast. And then
Nathan,
beast, yeah,
could I just ask,
yeah.
you could tell us how are we meant to put hands up, questions at the end? How does this work?
Um, I guess as we're going through the review, you can ask your questions. Maybe that would make, and
Okay,
then if you want to ask more questions at the end, then that's you can do that. You can stop me as I'm speaking because I might not be able to see your hand.
thanks.
Okay. Um, And then the point that I was trying to demonstrate with that is that when we come to the image of the beast, beast 2 in Revelation 13, there's two steps needed as well. There's a point in time where that image is created, um, and then it speaks about that image being given power or life by the dragon, um, for it to be able to rule. And so I was lining up 533 and 538 as a Sunday law. It's part of the same waymark, and in our history, this would be the Sunday law, where you have a cause and an effect. Effect, and so I guess that was the first thing, and the second point that I tried demonstrating from that was that when that beast number two is spoken about in verse 11, it's spoken about in the context of a lamb like beast, and it transitions into a dragon. But it's the same entity, it's the same state, just like you had with pagan Rome. In Daniel 2, that statue, it's iron, the legs of iron, and that's pagan Rome. And then the feet of iron and clay, that's papal Rome plus pagan Rome, but it's still pagan Rome. So now when we get to our history, it should be the same entity. It can't change from the USA into the UN, for example. It has to be a follow through that you have. Um, and from that, we just going through my notes, discuss this idea of cause and effect. Aldates has spoken about this in relation to the nature of a waymark, that when you want to understand a waymark, you have to understand the story that's being told about that waymark. You can't, or it's not beneficial to just look at a waymark in isolation. You have to understand it in the context of something that it belongs to. And just like every story, there's a beginning and an end to that story. And so it's the same case within a waymark. And so she demonstrates that in 1989, 2001, 2016, 2018, that there's two dates associated with a waymark where that story for that waymark starts and where that story for that waymark ends in this cause and effect relationship. Um,
Clinton.
yeah,
Haven't you got the notes to the study? Because I've been watching you and you keep putting extra stuff on, and there's different, haven't you got the notes for when you did the study for us in the
yeah,
UK?
this is what I'm going through.
Oh, I thought you had the old notes because it doesn't look similar to what I've took photos of.
I'm drawing different stuff in a summary fashion.
All right, thanks.
Yeah. So that I don't just end up doing a full study. I'm just skipping through some stuff to pick out the key points. Um, and so we have this cause and effect relationship, and so I wanted to spend some time understanding this cause. So went to talking about our line or our history as existing within a culture war. And in this culture war, you see that the driving movement or driving force that brings you to the Sunday law is the cultural issues of the day. And when you compare and contrast how God operates and how Satan operates, both beings are going to want to find someone who's going to be the vehicle to take their message to the world. God is going to take out the movement from the church and is going to use that as the stone. That's the vehicle. And Satan, because Satan's strategic, Satan needs to find an entity or a group or something that can do it effectively. And so I went through a bunch of statistics to show how America is not as religious as it was in the 1800s. And so if Satan is going to look for a vehicle to take that message, it it it's not going to be the NRA, the National Reform Association, which composed of all these churches. Satan's going to look for someone who or something that can do it effectively in a culture war. And so when you substitute religion to culture war, it's politics that's going to do that. So in when the fighting ground was over religious issues, on the surface, it's going to be churches, it's going to be your apostate Protestant churches, and in a culture war, it's going to be political parties that are going to do that fighting. And so that 10-year history prior to 1989 is the Protestant churches looking for a vehicle to take this fight to the world, to America, and they land on the Republican Party. Um, and so taking that into our minds that it's the Republican Party that's the Sunday law movement. It was the evangelical churches in histories prior, or the National Reform Association, which was really just a bunch of churches coming together. Today, it's a political party, the Republican Party. And when we consider when Ellen White talks about Babylon is fallen, she takes that and applies it to the churches who go back to the mother, because they were once standing, they were once pure, because to fall you have to have been standing in the first place. And so she associates that with the Protestant churches who were pure during the 1260, but then you get to 1798 and beyond, and now they fall. They're no longer pure. And so I tried showing how the Republican Party was pure during the 126, being on the right side, in inverted commas, of this cultural war that we speak about. But then over time, as voter bases changes and politics changes, they now become corrupt. And so they fall in our history. And I tried making the point that that doesn't take away from the story that you can tell from 1798. So if we draw a line like this, 1798, 1844, Sunday Law, COP, Second Advent, then what falls, because there's a first cry that says Babylon is fallen here, that Babylon is fallen, is, I'm going to suggest, in relation to those churches, and then here it's fallen is fallen. It's fallen twice. But once you break this line, and now you're looking at our history in isolation, and it becomes 1989 and 2001, then the fall that's spoken about here when the second angel arrives, and here when Revelation 18 comes and says it's fallen, um, I tried demonstrating how that's applicable to the Republican Party because now they're the vehicle, the church, if you want to call it that Satan's going to use to take the message to the world. And so if we go to Raphia and Panium, I dug out that history, and in that story of Daniel 11, Raphia, Panium, verse 16 lines up with the Sunday law from those studies that we did. And in those studies, that Sunday law was when Pompey goes into the glorious land in 63 BC. But at the same time, when Pompey is going into the glorious land in Rome, Julius Caesar runs for an election. And the election that he's running for is for the office of Pontifex Maximus. Um, Pontifex Maximus. And
Curtis,
yeah,
question about what you mentioned about Babylon is fallen, and then so one time in the first waymark and two times in the second waymark. Do you where does that idea come from again? Like, why is it one time first and then two times?
um, it's based on this idea that they get more corrupt as time goes on.
Okay,
Um, yeah,
okay, thank you.
and so I think Ellen White phrases it that way when speaking about Revelation 18. Revelation 18, she says, um, when the angel of Revelation 18 comes down, those churches are going to be more corrupt than they were when the initial call was that they've fallen. So it's based on that premise. Um,
Gotcha. Yeah, I thought that maybe like in one verse it said it's fallen, and then in the other it
mhm,
says it twice. But
no,
yeah,
I
I get it.
okay. And then I go into the history of Daniel 11, verse 11, 13, 14, 15, and 16. And verse 16, we've lined up with the Sunday law when we spoke about Raphia and Panium. And in that story, Rome is rising in verse 14, if I remember correctly, because they get involved in all that's going on with Antiochus and I can't remember who was king of the south, king of Egypt at that time. But they then defeat Antiochus between 200 BC and in later down the road. And then in 63 BC, now it's Rome that's going to be the king of the north. And Pompey is going to go into the glorious land. But in Italy, in Rome, internally in Rome, Julius Caesar is going to run for this election. And he's going to run for two offices. The first one is for Pontifex Maximus, and the second one is for Praetor. Praetor was like a magistrate, a civil magistrate, a judge, and there's not much said about it, the election for Praetor, but there's a bit more detail given for Pontifex Maximus. And when he runs for Pontifex Maximus, that's a religious role, and this is a state role. And the opposition that he has in this first election for Pontifex Maximus is Quintus. Let me get the proper name. Quintus Lutatius, Catullus, and the second opponent was Publius Servilius Isoricus. Um, and he wins that election. And so now he becomes the head of churches. And Pontifex Maximus was the chief high priest of the College of Pontiffs in Rome. And that's where we get the term pontiff for the Pope today. And so I discuss these names and break them down into their different meanings and how Publius Servilius is just public servant, really. Public servant. And then from Quintus, you can derive fifth month, or fifth month, whatever. And from Caesar, meaning elephant killer. And then obviously Julius Caesar names July after himself, having been born in the fifth month. So we have this symbology of a vote. Julius Caesar, Quintus, and Publius Servilius at this waymark. And Quintus and Publius were senators, respected senators. They were part of the establishment. And Julius Caesar was this populist who's coming in, went into debt to try and run for this election, etc., etc. But the point that I wanted to make from that is, I don't know if I spoke about it in our study. Someone can tell me if I didn't. But when we time set, what we do when we time set is we take something in its original context, so the 7 times, we take those words and then we make application of those words and turn it into something that originally it's not. And so the question is, can you do that with a name? Can you do that where you've done it with mene mene tekel upharsin, where in its original context it means something? Daniel is going to look at that something and then turn it into you've been found wanting and weighed in the balances. And then we're going to go and turn it into the 126 or the 151 or the 2520, etc. But you're going to do a lot of shape shifting to make it into a symbol that you can use for time. But the purpose of time setting isn't, the magic isn't in the time setting. It's in the fact that it's a magnifying glass that you can use to look at where you can compare and contrast. Because if you ask the question, how do I know where to compare and contrast or what to compare and contrast? My suggestion is, how you know is that now you have something, the 1 to 6, for instance, or quintus, which is fifth month, that's going to point you in a direction, and now you can compare and contrast two histories. So the compare and contrast that I suggest is this story with July, where you have someone, Caesar, Trump, who's going to be made the head of a church, the Republican Party, and he's going to kill that Republican Party as the elephant killer. And these two being the establishment is that he's defeated the establishment within the Republican Party as a public servant. So now it's a civil office that is doing that work. And then the last thing that we spoke about was this idea of gatekeepers. And I suggested that this framework that we have of an angel, messenger, and members is America's founding works in this, America's election system works in a similar way, according to the founders at least, where you have someone who has a message to make the movement, the nation better. And so that's Trump for argument's sake. And that person needs to get through the gatekeeper, who is the angel in this case, in order to take that ship or that kingdom in a specific direction. And so Trump needs to get through specific gates to be able to take that ship in a specific direction. And those gates, I'm suggesting, is the electoral college. And that's what it was designed for originally. That's why it was made. Um, Popular elections came down the road. They originally weren't part of the constitution. I don't even think they are now, but within the constitution, it's embedded this idea of a gatekeeper that's going to decide who's going to be president. And then your citizens are going to be guided by whoever gets the keys to that kingdom. So in the electoral college, let this person through, this messenger through. Now they have access to shape the kingdom in their direction. Um, and there were a whole load of other fluff added to the study, but that was the premise that you get to the Sunday law, um, and there's a cause and an effect at the Sunday law, as with other waymarks. But based on this idea of an image created, that image needs life or power to be able to do any work. And so I tried making the argument that July 18 is when that image is created by the Republican Party, and then December 17 is the USA's institutions. That's the dragon power, giving power to this image that was created, Trumpism, and that's your cause and effect as the Sunday law. So yeah, that was a very high level summary, and I know I've skipped through a lot of detail, but that's why it's a summary. So does anyone have any questions?
I didn't really have a question, but I feel a bit sorry no one's speaking, so I'll just say something. You know, like when you've got the Sunday law and you mark the mark of the beast, and then you're saying it's not a test, get tested at the loud cry. I think you put that in the last study. I haven't done it here.
Yeah, I didn't do it in the UK.
We used to say before the Sunday law was preparation day for the great test. So if you're saying that you get tested at the loud cry after the Sunday law, what would we do? Where would we put the preparation for that? Which whereabouts on the line? I'm just saying all this because no one else asked any questions, so I thought get the ball rolling a bit, maybe.
So is your question, where's the preparation for the test?
Yeah, back in the day, we used to say the preparation day, the sixth day, was before the Sunday law.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying we would say this, preparation,
Sixth day, yeah. And
then test, yeah.
yeah. So if you're saying now that or maybe it's always been, and we just haven't seen it that way, the test is actually the loud cry, so you're moving it after the Sunday law there. Where's the preparation then? Could you just show me on the line where we would prepare for that test at the loud cry? Or is
So
the test just there and we're showing our fruits all the way to the loud cry? I don't know how you say it.
so when we do this Boston Concord Exeter model, it's simplified. It's a concept that's been simplified because the reality is that this whole dispensation is a testing period. The idea is that a message is going to come at this waymark, and from this waymark, it needs time to develop. And through each point in this development, you're settling into your belief or your like what position you're going to take when it comes to Exeter. So speaking about 2014 to 2019, or let me say from 2001 to 2014, if at Concord, when the 2520 study is developed, if you don't accept the 2520, then you're not going to you're not going to accept the 126. So each of those steps are really a stepping stone to get to this issue that's now going to determine whether you move to the next dispensation or not. I'm saying that simply. So I still hold to this idea that there's preparation here. Um, the point that I was trying to make by saying that the mark of the beast is here is trying to demonstrate the idea that at this waymark, it's not done and dusted. It's not finished. That story is not finished. That story still needs time to develop until you formally receive whichever you're going to receive, the mark of the beast or the seal of God at this point when the door shuts. Um, yeah.
You know, before the Sunday law, an increase of knowledge. What's that test for?
You have to be a bit more specific on what line.
Let's just, I don't know, let's just stick on that line, wherever that line you put there is at the 144,000.
So
Or
you're
if you've got the increase of, oh yeah, oh no, that's difficult with 144,000.
yeah. So that's why I asked which line.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Um, anyone else?
Yeah, so um you were saying that we receive the seal of God or the mark of the beast at the loud cry. But you did mention that officially it's at the close of probation. Can you elaborate on that?
That the testing issue, the thing that's going to determine if you receive the mark of the beast or the seal of God, I'm suggesting is the message that's given here at the loud cry. And throughout this period, it's your testing period. Tess will frame it as you hand in your papers at the shut door at this final waymark. So when you hand in your papers, now the examiner is going to look at your paper and see if you got the correct answers or not, and you're going to get a seal or a mark. You're going to get the seal of God or the mark of the beast. So yeah.
Mm. So I have another question. If it might not be directly related, or like it stems from a study by Elder Terry, um, but want to know your opinion, like because it's related to this thing. So like she was talking about, the Sunday law being this is the national Sunday law in the US. And then there's the global Sunday law, which happens at the close operation. Um, do you, so how does that impact this model in terms of when we receive the seal of God or the mark of the beast? Is it like country based, or is it like in the global one? I don't know if that makes sense.
This Sunday law is related to the national Sunday law when we speak about America. So
Mm.
whatever we're speaking about here has to be in regards to the context of that Sunday law.
So does that mean that only the people in the United States receive the mark of the beast at the loud cry?
Because this story is about the glorious land, I think in this specific story, Daniel 11 verse 41, that's what this is.
Okay.
Um, yeah.
Can I just ask you what the 2021 is? You're saying that's the formalization of the Sunday law.
Increase of knowledge.
Oh, sorry, yeah. And then
Yeah.
where's the formalization? No, you put increase in us by 2019. So yeah, like I said, 2021 is a formalization,
Yeah.
which what would you say that was Exeter?
In this
That's different.
dispensation from 2021, from 2001, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's
So that would be
Exeter.
Boston, Concord, Exeter.
So isn't that Exeter meant to show you everything that's going to happen on the next waymark?
And so that was 2021, and the study that Elder Tess associates with that is radical feminism. And
Okay.
the dates, if you want to talk about it, that are going to be associated with that are January 6th. And um, um, I didn't get to finish the study with you, but I had built on it to go on to suggest that the effect of that was February 13, when Trump is acquitted in his second impeachment trial.
But you know, when you say that the Exeter is basically, it's kind of like the test because everything's given to you.
Hmm.
Are you saying it's the test of the following waymark, which is 2024, you're saying?
Yeah,
So why are we getting tested again after that waymark for the same test?
it's every dispensation you have this Boston Concord Exeter
Yeah, so it's a different
thing.
method
So it's
going
a
forward.
different, yeah. So this message
Yeah,
that comes here, I don't know what the loud cry is going to be, but that's going to be a different testing issue. But
yeah,
it's based on the same principles.
yeah, it's okay.
Hmm.
I'm not agreeing with everything on your board, but I'm just saying, yeah, I get the concept structure there. Yeah, thanks.
Okay. What don't you agree with?
Uh, just I'm not. I think this is the first time you've done it, but I'm not too sure about the January the 6th
Okay.
and the 5th February. Is it 13th? Says there.
Hmm. Okay. Why
Um,
do you have alternative dates?
I've never even thought about putting January the 6th there. So,
But you said you disagree.
I mean, well, I do disagree because I kind of never thought about it. So I suppose I don't disagree because I've never thought about it. I see what you mean. But that's the first time you put that there. So that's
Hmm.
why I'm questioning it.
I think Elder Test puts January 6th there anyway.
Does she? Okay.
I'll dig that out.
Well, she said, I think someone said, didn't she? One of the other speakers said that she's going to get into trouble for that because putting January the
Hmm.
6th at
On a
Panya.
different line.
Yeah.
So a different story. Okay. Um, I've been asked why not November 5, just because no one's asking me any questions. Why not November 5 um, over here at the effect when the general population is voting? Um, because my answer to the question that's been asked by not anyone in this group is when you bookend something, it's it's the bookend of a story that's being told. So what you see at the beginning, you see at the end. And my straightforward answer is that this is just a repeat and enlarge of what was at the beginning. Because your primaries or your national conventions are just mini electoral colleges. So you have your primaries take place before your national conventions, and then you have your national convention where your delegates are going to decide. In the same way, November is your citizens or your primaries, I'll put in inverted commas, primaries take place, and then you have your delegates deciding at the electoral college. And then more broadly, is that how I've understood the USA in different studies, at least, is that the USA is built on an ideology in its institutions, in its amendments, in how power is distributed and decentralized, in a lot of aspects about Americanism is built on libertarianism, this idea of liberty and freedom and decentralizing power and etc. And the Electoral College was a compromise with this in mind because Jefferson Madison didn't want to create another monarchy. Alexander Hamilton wanted a big, strong central government, and as well as the other ideas that he wanted with regards to gatekeeping, etc. And so Madison and Jefferson are going to say, well, these smaller states need a bigger voice because if we just let a popular vote go through and the big states let everyone vote, then all these small states are going to have no voice. And so they argue and they come to this conclusion that power is going to be distributed to the states. I've maybe oversimplified that. But this electoral college, I think, is symbolic of this idea of decentralization, and we need to afford liberty to the states. And that's a characteristic of the dragon, um, I think. And so, yeah, that's just to answer a question that wasn't asked, but at least I've said it publicly. Why I think the electoral college is the end of this story. It's the same thing at the beginning and the end, and yeah, just this libertarian ideology demonstrated in that formal institution of the electoral college. Another thing is when we spoke about time setting, I said time setting is not the end, it's a means to an end. And so where you see symbols, it can be easy to fall into, what's the word? Um, it's spiritualism, but it's where you use numbers and just find them as coincidences, and you use those patterns and
Numerology.
etc.
No.
Yeah, that's the one, numerology. And instead, what we should be doing is numeric symbology, where you take a number and you use that as a symbol to make a point. And the point I'm suggesting is to compare and contrast. So one of those numbers that I'm going to use as a symbol is 538, which is that there's 538 delegates that vote at the electoral college. And so that I'm going to use that to compare and contrast with the year 538, as when the dragon is now going to give power to the papacy, give life to the papacy, because now the papacy now has the backing of a state government behind them. Yeah.
Sorry, did you just say you're going to use the 538 electrical college to say 538 is what?
538 AD. I'm using that to take me to a history that I can now compare and contrast with ours.
Can we do that with, isn't that numerology? I don't know.
I think Tess does similar things where she takes 273 people and then she's going to go into a history to compare and contrast with ours. So this, I'm saying the thing that I'm doing is comparing and contrasting 538 with the Electoral College, but the hook that I'm using to do that is the number.
Are you answering the question there? Why not November 5th? Are you saying why not November 5th is the Sunday law?
As the bookend of my cause and effect. So here I've suggested that July is the cause where the image is created, and then what gives power to this image that's created. And so I've been asked, not by anyone here, but just because no one was asking questions, why do you say December 17 and not November 5? And so that's why I was going through why I say December, because it's representative of this ideology that the dragon represents.
Okay. So on the back of that, you know, the first two lines you did about
Where?
the first two about Sunday law, about the pattern. Yeah, that one, 538 there, with the 538 as the effect. And you
Mhm.
put Sunday law in, you've got cause, 533. Because I think originally we would put Sunday law at 538. So on the one
Mhm.
below, you've put cause created, Sunday law, then effect. And you're saying that's when the dragon gives power. So in your model, you're going to put December 17th there and you're putting July in the cause.
Mhm. And
But that's not
so with
Sunday law, that is
538, we make that Sunday law because the Council of New Orleans, they passed some Sunday law with regards to churches and etc. So we make that a Sunday law. But in a different model, we make 538 COP, because then the papacy is going to rule supremely. So depending on the story, 538 is going to mean different things. And so I'm suggesting that 533 and 538 have the same properties, in that the state is going to do something with regards to the church. They're going to come into an alliance. 533 is just this, oh, whoops. 533 is this, the preparation for this as a Sunday law, because everything that we see in 538 is exactly what was already in place in 533. So I'm making this a Sunday law as well, and that Sunday law as well in this cause and effect relationship. So this would be Sunday law, and that's going to be Sunday law as well.
And that's where you'd put July and
December.
you're bookending it, July and
Yeah.
December.
Yeah.
So, and you've talked about making the image and giving it life. So in that, is that the top, very top line? What did you put there?
Mm-hmm.
Created life and power. So that's not connected to speaking.
No, that's not connected to speaking, because first that image is created, then it's given life to be able to do a work, and then later down the road, that image that was created is now going to speak, is now going to act, and that's the sequence of the verses in um, Revelation 13 in that second half. Is that the image of the beast is created, it's given power, and then it causeth, whereas Ellen White will say it commands. Um, so it's this process. So in our presentation, I went to Genesis to demonstrate that with Adam being created. That Adam is created, but it's just a lifeless body. It can't do anything. And then God is going to give life to Adam, and then Adam's going to stand up, and the next day, whenever later that day, Adam's going to speak. Adam's going to do the different things that Adam does. So I'm separating each of these things as
Have you
I
put
think
them
I'm
all
wrestling,
away, Mark? Sorry, Emma.
I'm just wrestling with the 538 because I think we'd say if it's given life, it has power there to speak. That's when it speaks. Because I think this is what I've said to you before about the life and speaking. What's the difference between the life and the speaking?
because the life or the power is coming from a different entity. So if we draw this out here, here's the papacy. It's lifeless, and then the dragon has the power, has the life. It's in their grasp. They own this thing. They own power, and they own life. And then they are going to give to the papacy this power or life so that the papacy can speak, can go about and speak. So that's why I'm separating between this and this as two different things. This is giving the papacy the ability to speak.
I think I conceptualized that the only way you can see that it's got the ability or the power is because it speaks. So it's that discrepancy, I suppose, that I'm saying. That I think before I would have said at the Sunday law, it speaks, it's showing it's speaking by that action. So it's got the power there to do that law. So the power.
But where did it get the power from? It's not something that it has on its own. It has to get that power from something else.
No, yeah. But the reason you know it's got the power is because it speaks. So
Yeah.
that's evidence that it's got the power, and I'd equated the two to the same thing. So it's got power and it's speaking now, and
So
that's showing it's got the power.
So I'm not necessarily saying that speaking is not equal to power.
Okay.
It's that there's first to be able to do the speaking, it needs to get power from something else.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm talking about, is that it's getting power from something else, another entity, from the dragon. And then wherever you're going to put that speaking, that's not the point that I'm making in this specific story. It's, yeah. If I want to talk about the speaking, the parable that I've used before is Daniel 3.
Daniel 3. I was going to say Daniel 3 is where you split it out. Yeah.
Yeah. But each story is going to show you a different element of things.
Okay. So like when you just referred to 538, that's showing the power given as opposed to the speaking. It's just the power being given by pagan Rome to papal Rome.
Pagan Rome, yeah. And if you want to make that council in New Orleans the speaking, then okay. But that's something separate to the story about the Ostrogoths, being removed, and now the armies of Rome are now going to be used by the papacy. If one does want to argue about that council in New Orleans.
Okay.
You explain, Curtis, I can't remember which one it says. You used the term cause and effect.
Yeah.
Why is July a cause and December is an effect? Why? I'm not trying to say what's the relationship between the two, but why is one a cause and one is the effect? Can you just explain how you would? July is the creation. What's getting created in July?
The image of the beast.
So that's the creation of the image of the bit. So July is the creation of the image, and the effect is
when
the
the
image now
dragon
has
gives
power.
life. Yeah.
Someone gives power to the image. And who gives power to the image?
United States institution, the USA, the dragon.
Okay, so just explain that in terms of cause and effect, because I don't know what the words cause and effect mean.
Okay, so something's going. I don't want to make it sound obvious, but something's going to happen in a story, and then the domino effect of that is that this last thing happens because this first domino fell. So in my own words, something happens in July that sets off this chain reaction that is going to mean that this final event is going to take place, the effect. So you have to be able to trace this last thing back to something. And this is where, in this story, that can be traced to. Does that kind of answer your question?
How would you define July? What's being created in July, and don't without using imagery? How would you define it, or a different imagery or a different term?
That Trump is being made or Trumpism is being made the leader of the Sunday Law movement. Is being
So
crowned
is
the
it the
head of
creation
that
of the
church.
Sunday Law movement? You said created.
It's I don't want to use imagery or symbology that you've pointed to, but it's the culmination of that work, of this image being created. So it's reached its final form, if you want to put it that, because you can trace this story from 1989,
Is
and
that
then
it? The
this
Sunday Law
this
movement.
yes,
So it's not Trump per se. The Sunday Law movement
no
is
movement.
created in July. Is that what you're
Yes,
saying?
it's reached its culmination, but it needs someone who's going to be the figurehead for that, the head of its church, and that's Trump when Trump is crowned the head of that Sunday Law movement.
So the Sunday Law movement is created in July.
It's finished its creation.
Okay, so you're saying the creation takes 30 odd years. That's what
Yeah.
you're if. And then in December, that created being is given, or entity is given power.
Is now being given the ability to go to work.
Okay.
Curtis,
Yeah.
would that mean on December the 17th that the three branches of government are finished? Or that it happened way before?
I don't think those three branches ever finish. They just
Okay.
remain as institutions as part of the United States.
And they just
and they
do
get
what?
used. Just
Yeah,
like
by the
every
rules.
president before comes in and uses those institutions to move on with their agenda. Now we have the Sunday Law movement moving with their agenda using those institutions. the three branches. I think that's how you phrased it. Yeah.
I think the reason why I was struggling, not with the modeling's fine. It's just that when you say cause and effect, so I don't know if this is a good definition. The meaning of cause and effect is the direct relationship between an action. The action is this movement is created, and its consequence or result. Just because something is created, it doesn't result in its cause and effect. Seems to me an inevitable thing.
Sure.
Just because if it was created, it doesn't mean it's going to receive power. It could just be created and just lie there forever.
I
think
guess
that's why
I get this term cause and effect just because it's something that we're familiar with, at least from other teachers.
I guess I'm unfamiliar with it because I've heard it used,
Yeah.
but I've never understood how people are using it. And that's what, and I'm still not sure how you're using it here, because I thought a cause and effect means something happens and therefore something that follows has to happen.
And I guess you can use this story in that way, that once Trump is put on the Republican ticket, what has to happen is that Trump needs to go into office for the events of the Sunday law period.
It's not inevitable that it does. That's my point. That's how cause and effect works, I thought, unless I don't understand cause and effect. Because I'm not discussing the modeling. The modeling is fine. It's just I've never understood that term, and you've used it in a very similar way that others have used it. Even Elder Tess has used it, and I've not. I don't want to say I disagreed with people, but I've not understood it from that depth. It was just Merriam-Webster. And it doesn't seem to fit for me.
Sure.
So I'm assuming I'm missing something.
Yeah, I'll take that away. But the main point wasn't necessarily this terminology. It was this idea of a bookend of a story. That you have a start and the end of a story.
And could you just not restate, but explain, if you can, or re-explain, because I think you've already done it, why the election in November isn't, obviously it's part of the story, so I don't want to say it's not part of the story, but why does it not figure in this model? Why does it end up just melting away and being not part of this story in the way that you've done it? Because there could be several waymarks. I don't think you're arguing that.
Yeah.
But why does it not become
the end? And why does December become the end?
Okay, now let me rephrase it. No, I think you've already said it's December because it's an institution that does that, not people. So I think I understood that. And I'm not arguing the modeling that you used to prove that in previous histories, you end up seeing it's the institution that does it. And I think you've said angel gatekeeper, that the equivalent of that couldn't be people. You're saying it's a system or an institution, which in our dispensation will be electrical. So I'm not arguing that. How would you speak to November in this story if you were going to tell a story?
I would see it as part of this, because when you do the bookend of a story and the start and the end, you're not negating the middle ground and everything that happens in between, because ultimately, just how the electoral college works is that the people that vote in November are saying, you electors, go and decide this for us. So they're part of this story, but in regards to the institutions, at least, that's the story that I'm telling. So they become the middle ground or the body of that story.
So when you say this is the story that you're telling, are you saying that there's another story that we could tell, or are you saying this is the story?
I'm saying this is the story.
So it's not your story.
Yeah, sure. This is what I think the story is.
Yeah, I'm saying there's no story that brings in November. November is not. It's an event.
Yeah.
It's an event that happens in a sequence, but it's not. There's no story that would have November as a key point.
Yeah.
That's why I just want to clarify.
Yeah.
And is November inevitable? Is it a done deal? Once the image has been created, is November inevitable?
You mean Trump winning the election?
Yes. Because
I'm going to say no, because nothing's inevitable.
Okay, because if you're going to do cause and effect, I would say November would be a cause, and the effect, the inevitability is December has to happen unless those electoral college, unless those delegates are going to cheat. So if they don't cheat, that's an inevitability after the election. So, are you saying that November is not inevitable in this story, but it may be in another story?
Sure.
Okay, so this story here, as you're repeating history, and you've given this conclusion, the winning in November is not inevitable. But I'm not asking you for another story. I'm not saying that you even have one. But do you believe that there is another story that says November was inevitable?
Yes, prophetically.
Okay, so if it was inevitable, then the cause and effect that you have here in that other story would be true, because
That
even though
it's
you
July
have,
and November.
well, if you have November, you would have December with it, because it would be cause effect effect. But in this story, it isn't inevitable.
November, you mean?
November and December end up becoming the same thing, because
Sure, yeah.
November says you will do what we told you to do.
Yeah.
But
And
July.
Sorry, I'm trying to unpack what your question is. I don't fully understand.
Okay, so my question is, first of all, you've agreed that cause and effect perhaps isn't the right way of saying that.
Yeah.
That's fine. My question is, in this story, is the winning of the election by, if you want to call it the image or the Sunday Law movement, is it inevitable that they would win?
Prophetically, yes, because that's what prophecy says.
Could you just explain why prophecy says, sorry, they will win? I'm going to say in November, July 24, when July 24 happens, will they prophetically, will they have to win November 24?
Because once that entity has been created, the image, once Trump has taken over the Republican Party, the Sunday Law movement, to bring about everything that we have for the end of the world and etc., they need office to do what they're going to do, to bring about the changes to the American system. They need the government's backing. So,
Okay.
yeah, I guess that's the inevitability of it. They
Why
need
couldn't
to
it
be in
be
office
November
to do that.
28 after July 24? Why can't it be November 28? Why does it have to be November 24?
November 5.
2024. November 2024. Why can't it be November 2028?
Oh, because in other studies at least, I've tried to demonstrate that 2024 as a year itself is where America changes its dynamic, its relationship to the world, using other compare and contrast with other histories and the 126 and etc. 2024 becomes a year in which there's all these changes that we expect to take place related to the Sunday Law.
So are you saying that your time set in the year?
Yeah.
With the 2520?
Yes.
Okay.
For reference, for anyone's reference, I think I did that in Germany 3 weeks ago. And I think other teachers have recognized similar things. But
Which
I'll
other
stand.
teachers?
I think Catherine in Australia did a similar study on 2024. And myself. So
Okay, so just
another
Catherine.
teacher.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Did Catherine get it from you, or you got it from Catherine? Or you came
Independent.
independently?
Independent.
at the same time?
I don't know what was first, what was second, but
Well, within weeks or days of one another.
yeah, I only saw her study her presentation after I had done mine, so that's why I say independent.
Okay, great.
And
Thank you.
I think I had
Oh.
spoken to other people about it before I did the study, publicly at least.
Okay. Thanks.
Curtis.
Andres?
So, I just want to get clarification on the role of the electoral college. So is they from what, yeah, so is their role to, as gatekeepers, they should have, even if no, and that ties back to November, like even if, you know, the people vote in November and they vote for Trump, is the role of the electoral college, I think what you were saying is that they should have uh disregarded the decision of the people because Trump was not fit for office.
Not saying what they should or shouldn't have done. It's just that that's the culmination of the work. Different states have different rules with regards to how to handle electors. Some states are bound, like you just have to say what the people say, and some states are, you decide what you want to do. The election in November is, we don't even have to have an election in November. It's just become a general accepted thing that you do, and then the states are going to decide how you have that election. I'm not saying don't have elections, but my point is that in the constitution, that election in November isn't mentioned, it's not required, etc. But states got together and decide and recognize that this is pretty undemocratic, so we should let the people have a say. So with regards to what they should or shouldn't have done and become faithless electors or not, it's not my place. I'm just using that as a symbol to encapsulate this idea of an institution making a decision.
But what does it mean that they're the gatekeepers then? If they, yeah, what does it mean that they're the gatekeepers?
Because they decide who's going to be president.
Oh, it's not the people that decide it.
People are they are representatives of the people. So I'm going to be forced to say yes, it's really the people, but in what I'm trying to demonstrate is that it's institutions that are representative of everything below them. And I think that's what I gleaned from Daniel 3 at least, is that representatives are going to go to the plane of Jura, not the citizens, and they're going to do everything on the plane of Jura. So it's not removing the people from that story, it's just they symbols, they the face of everything that's happening. Yeah.
Yeah. So like I guess I'm struggling with the word gatekeeper in that sense.
Um, Hypothetically, if the electors decide, no, we're not voting for Trump, then Trump doesn't go in, no matter what the people say, because they're allowed to do that.
Got it. Okay.
In this study, just above where I can't see, it says angel straight gatekeeper. That's the electoral college. Have you always used the term gatekeeper for the electoral college, or have you used gatekeeper in another context?
I've used it in the context of an informal institution, which would be the National Convention as well, because they serve as the first gate, if you want to call it, before a president gets to the election later down the road.
Okay, so you've used the term gatekeeper in speaking about different, if I can call them an institution, different entities, And in this story, the gatekeeper is the electoral college, but that doesn't mean the term gatekeeper can be used to identify a different entity making a different point.
Yeah, and that's what I've done in past studies, and making a different
Yes.
point. The gatekeepers are the national conventions.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, maybe about that. I'm not sure I followed. Could you like explain what Parminder was saying?
He was referencing, I think, a study that I've done in the past where I've referred to political parties as gatekeepers, with regards to who's going to stand on the ticket. And the points that I was making in those studies were that conservative parties typically serve a role in society, generally, when you look historically, with keeping populists out, or in inverted commas, dictators out from getting to be able to govern. And so that gatekeeper role would have been served by Mitch McConnell, by the leaders of the Republican Party, because generally, how primaries work is who gets the backing of the gatekeepers ends up standing on the ticket. And this happened in 2016 with Bernie Sanders, where he cries, "Ah, you cheated me," is because there was all this push from the Democrat Party's elites or gatekeepers for Hillary Clinton to be the person that stands on the ticket. So they have a strong influence with regards to who's going to be on the ticket. Yes, the population vote in the primaries, but it's at the control of your invisible hand, as they call it, your elites. So and that point that I was making in past studies was that your gatekeepers in the Republican Party, they made a deal with the devil, if I can say it that way, inverted commas, facetiously. Okay, let me not use that terminology. They they made a deal because they recognized that to win we need this person, and that person that they found was Trump. Despite everything that happened in Trump's first term, they said, actually, this is the person that can get us to power. And so they let Trump through when they had the opportunity to stop Trump from even getting to the election in November. And so in that study, I was pointing out that the blame is on the Republican Party for Trump, not the Democrats. It's the Republican Party's fault. So I guess that's, I think, what Alpamindo was hinting at, and what I was saying, that in a different story, the gatekeeper changes. In a different study, the gatekeeper.
Got it.
Mm-hmm.
If I can
Yeah.
just ask a little bit more about that. So if I've understood you correctly, what you've said is before December happened, there's a group of people who are in power of an entity, and the people who are in power, another term for that, are people who control the gate. They allow people in and they keep people out. And in the Republican Party, I know you said the RNC, but I don't know if you say RNC and Republican Party synonymously. If you do, then the people in charge, the movers and shakers of that party, they allow Trump to become the de facto leader. So the gatekeeper in that sense, I think that's how you've just explained it now. But have you also explained it, not that there are just gatekeepers in the Republican Party who say who can be the boss and who can't be the boss, but the Republican Party itself are the gatekeepers of the country, to stop the country going into anarchy or whatever evil system of governance we might you know, if you're in the West, we'd say socialist or communist, to stop a country going down an evil path. It's not everybody doing their fair part. It's not about people. It's about a party that ends up being the gatekeeper for the country on behalf of the country. You didn't quite say it that way this time. So I just want to clarify if that's what you've said in the past. So it's not just the gatekeepers to let Trump in to rule them. They become gatekeepers on a much higher level.
Yes, and that's how I've explained it in the past, not now, but in the UK last year.
Yes. And the reason why I wanted to bring that up is because I think for most people, if it hasn't come as a surprise, it should have done, because we've been not educated, at least inculcated into the idea that the guardians of morality, honesty, decency, fair play, all of those things, which we might just encapsulate that to say democracy, which isn't probably a good synonym, are the left, or the Democrats. And you've taught something completely different.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's registered in people's minds what you've done and the significant change. So whatever we see today from 89 to the present, we think the Democrats are the people who are holding, who are the custodians of the truth in whatever form that is. You're saying actually in previous histories, it's the Republican Party. So my question is,
Conservatives in general.
in this history, was it the left or the right?
That
You went to World War II, pre-World War, and you said in that history, the people who are defenders of the faith are the right, the conservatives. We're calling the Republicans the equivalent. Who are the defenders of the truth or nobility and right and wrong today? Was it the left or was it the right still? And the right and the left have always done some crazy, I don't know.
So,
if I understand my question.
sure. In those histories, it wasn't that the left were lawless people. The point was that the left had their belief system of what's right and wrong, and things that we would probably align ourselves with what's right and wrong. The simple example is the monarchy. The United Kingdom wants to move with the times, and the left wants to move with the times, wants people to be able to vote. And the conservatives, if the United Kingdom democracy was going to flourish or do well, the left could have done all that they wanted. But if the conservatives didn't let go of power, because by its nature, conservative means we want to conserve what's already there. So in those histories, it was, are these conservatives going to let us move forward? And so that's what I meant when I went back to those histories and said, who really decides what's going to happen? It's whether or not those conservatives are going to let go and release a bit of power. And you can speak about it in the same framework as the patriarchy, that if women want rights, where do they have to get them from? They have to get them from men because they hold the power. So then fast forward to today, if you want to change anything, the person that you need to convince is the conservative because they're holding on to something that they're wanting to conserve. And so the real custodians are men, or in this case, conservatives or the Republican Party.
So
That.
the people who want to make progress, I
Mm-hmm.
think you call them the progressives, are always the ones that want to do right, to promote social reform, and the people on the right, the conservatives, who want to conserve
The status quo.
the status quo. It's not that they're the good ones.
Evil. Mm-hmm.
It's the fact that without their participation, change doesn't happen, but the people who are driving change are the people on the left, not the people on the right.
Just by nature of progression and conservative. And that's not to say what the progressives want is good or what the conservatives want are conserving something bad. It's just that's what to conserve means and that's what to progress means. So it's not defining who the good and the bad people are. It's just a reflection of the principles that they hold to.
Okay. And it's not pointing out who are the defenders of the democratic process, or it is.
I think you can look at it that way as well. Because this democratic process was established under a certain system. And when you look at your conservatives, that's what they're wanting to conserve, is what was there originally. That's what originalism is they're holding dear something that was set in place. And your progressives are saying, let's move on from whatever we agreed to then, let's move. And your conservatives are saying, we agreed to this, so let's stick to what we agreed to.
I get that, but it still it still doesn't take you to the place that they become the defenders of democracy, does it? Or the custodians of democracy, or the gatekeepers of democracy. Maybe I've misunderstood that point in the past.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to even say that you've said it in that way, but that's
Yeah, I'm not framing it that in that the idea is that if you want democracy to work well, not if you want it to die or live or etc., you need people to play fair. You need people to at least be willing to play ball. And at least typically, historically, it's conservative parties that decide if the game is going to be played anyway. Um, so it's not that they kill democracy, or it's just they decide whether the game is played or not. So yeah, maybe
sorry about that.
yeah.
So it's not that the Democrats want to change democracy. They just want to progress. They just want to make some reforms of whatever the reform they want to make. And in order for them to do that, to progress, the right need to be willing to work with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Curtis, because so what I like thought at some point that you uh were saying in the past was that the Republicans are the gatekeepers, and the way I understood it was I mean the gatekeepers of democracy in the sense that as a party, like political parties are built for that, not because they're the Republicans or the Democrats. So Republicans are gatekeepers just as much as Democrats are gatekeepers in that their job role is to not let, I'm gonna just say it like silly, like you know, crazy people become the candidates.
So is your question, have I said in the past that political parties serve a function in society? Is that your question?
um yeah.
And I'm going to say yes, they serve a function in society. There's a reason why independents don't win. One, because they need the backing of political parties. And so those political parties act as filters um, with regards to who's going to be able to run for president. An independent can stand up and say, I want to run because I don't want to give in to what these political parties stand for, but they just get nowhere. And so the responsibility for the political parties is that they do a good job of filtering. And when I say political party, I mean the bosses, the top people in that political party.
And so if I could like ask all of the, so it seems that the gatekeepers being used at different levels. Like one is the electoral college, that is the gatekeeper for the country. Another use of that gatekeeper word is for the
Country
party
as
lead
well.
for the country.
Hmm.
So how can you
It's like a
enumerate
two-step.
all of
It's like a two-step process. You pass one gate, and then you get to the other gate. So the first gate that you need to pass is the party gate, um, as a messenger, and then the next gate you need to pass is the electoral college. I mean, included in that the popular vote, etc. But they serve similar functions with regards to whether this populist, I'm not going to put a name, but just generally whether this populist is going to come out the other side as president,
yeah. And
excluding
so
independents. Yeah.
so it's those two levels, and then also within the party you have what was the term, like the invisible hand?
So that invisible hand is the party. It's the same thing that I was
Okay,
talking
so we
about.
only
Yeah.
have two applications of the word gatekeeper, if I'm understanding correctly.
And what I'm trying to put across, yes.
Okay, cool.
So what about left-wing populism? So someone's asked the question in the chat. What about left-wing populism? Who is the gatekeeper for that? It would be your left-wing party. They serve the similar role. So Bernie Sanders was stopped at the gate because, for whatever reason, the Democrats decided that Bernie Sanders is not fit to run in the election. They acted as gatekeepers for the Democrat Party. If you're going to characterize Bernie Sanders as a populist. But that was just an example. And a follow-up question, does that mean both the Democrats and Republicans are gatekeepers? Yes, that's what I was trying to demonstrate to Andres, is that your political parties in general serve a function in society. Typically, historically at least, you generally find that it's conservative parties that are forced to play this role. I haven't looked into why, or thought about why. It's generally conservative parties that you have populists coming through, but generally it is the case. There have been instances in America's history. I can't remember the person's name, but he came in through the left, and he was stopped at the gate, and didn't end up getting far. But there have been runs by populists on the left, but fine in between.
Why did they always come from the right?
That's what I said. I haven't looked into it or thought why it's generally the right. I think yeah, go on.
Is it because, for whatever the reason is, I don't know the cause and effect, I'm going to just say that, that a libertarian perspective, which is inherent in the American mind, and I guess the British mind, to be fair, that ends up morphing or turning into a right wing, or today they call it the alt-right. It ends up morphing into a conservative mindset more often than it does into a left mindset. That's why today we keep on identifying that libertarianism is evil as the alt-right. It's not because they're the same thing. It's because they tend to morph into those. And I wonder if that's why they spawn so many populists because the definition of a populist is a libertarian perspective,
Yeah.
however fake that is.
Yeah, I haven't thought about it in that specific way, but I can see it in that way as being the case. From different books that I've read about how Democrat parties, left-wing parties and right-wing parties work, is, again, I don't know why it is the case, but at least in America, and I guess it's the same here in England, is that when your left-wing parties go to campaign, they will make things like will lay down the facts of this is why this needs to happen. Whereas conservative parties have unlocked the code of how to get people to go out and vote for you, is that people are primarily driven by emotion, our fast brain. And yet consistently Democrats or the left or Labour will appeal to your slow brain, that it makes sense to do things this way, that you should just follow us because this is why it makes sense, X, Y, Z. But people aren't wired to behave like that. We're wired to be driven by our emotion or our fast brain. And I don't know why the left or Democrats don't take a page out of the conservative book. There's reasons for that. But the way in which they operate is different. The way in which they campaign is different. And so your populists are going to appeal to your emotions, to your fast brain, and etc. And so that's just different ways in which campaigns operate and why you end up seeing a rallying around populists when they do stand up.
I thought it was because, sorry, just to add to that, I think it's what you've already said, really, and what you said last year, I thought it was because the Conservatives are the ones who've been there from the beginning. They came out of the monarchy and they had the power and the riches of whatever it was, the strength to, and now they've got to be willing to give some of that power over.
Yeah.
In order to let anybody do anything.
Yep. And I use the model of patriarchy to kind of demonstrate that in a patriarchy, it's whatever rights that you're going to get, they're going to come from men. And so they're the gatekeepers of deciding who gets rights.
So in that sense, they're the ones that gatekeep. I get back to Charity's question, democracy.
What question?
Democracy. So the gatekeepers of democracy, because she says, so does that contradict what you said last year about Conservatives being the gatekeepers of democracy? It just seems the Conservatives seem to have more power. The left ones are trying to make changes. The Conservatives have the power and they have to say yes to those changes in order for that to happen.
I think it can sound like I'm saying different things, but if you stick to the point that I'm trying to make in one specific story, if I can take it that way, I'm saying this idea of change. Who's going to be the gatekeeper to democracy and the changes that are going to take place in democracy? It's conservatives that are going to do that because just of the nature of wanting to hold on to the past. So that was my presentation last year as the gatekeepers of democracy, in whether they're going to play by the rules, whether they're going to play fairly, whether they're going to let go of some power. That's that point. And then this other point, which Andres was asking about, is what purpose or what role do Democrats serve? And I'm saying that once in a blue moon, a populist is going to rise up in the Democrat Party, and they're also going to have a job to perform. But typically, if you take a sample out of all these instances, you can make a strong case that it's your conservatives that are going to do that, not your Democrats, or it's going to come from your conservative brand of politics.
Could I ask a question?
Yeah.
It's kind of a question. Maybe it's not even a question. So you have these two parties, And it's not so much what the left are going to do or not do, or what they're even trying to do. It's that both of these parties are working together for the common cause of the government, of the country, working along the same principles. And if I go with the assertion that about libertarianism and its association with conservatism, once in a while, someone is created, there's some external things happening, and this person is created, and they end up more often than not coming up in this process as they rise to power and influence on the right, in the Conservative Party, because that's a breeding ground for these types of people, which the label is populists. And it's because more often than not, these populists who are doing their own things, which we'll say are anti-democratic in nature, and they're going to rise from the right, from the conservative, because that's the best place to be born in. It's an environment that's favorable for their creation. That's why it ends up being an issue that the right have to deal with, not the left. It's not that what the left are going to do or what they do. It's just a problem has arisen in the Conservative Party, and what will they do about it? Will they allow this undemocratic person to rise up, take control of their party and do whatever they want to? Or will they make a decision to suppress that populist uprising and carry on with the status quo? And it's in that context that they're a gatekeeper. So that's kind of part statement. Is that what you're saying, or at least close to it?
Yes, and I think you see something similar in France, where in France you have time and time again Le Pen pushing the boundary, and obviously elections work differently there. But the Conservative Party, which is your right of center, um, would be willing to, instead of giving the keys to Le Pen, they would be willing to reach across the aisle to the left and say, let's make sure that this person who's on the far right doesn't come in. And so, in that framework, they're serving this role as a gatekeeper. Or how it would work in a different setting, or how it has worked in a different setting, if I can put it that way.
Thank you. That French story I found quite helpful.
Are there any other questions? It may not necessarily be about what we've discussed today, but anything that I've taught publicly. Okay. Emma?
Okay.
I'm willing to go on, but
just one more question, I guess.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't like to be provocative, and just say you don't want to answer if you don't want to. The 4 presentations that Elder Terry has done, 2 in January, Fiji, 2 in February, France. I don't know if you've watched all 4.
I believe I have, yeah.
Is there anything you disagree with her in those in what she's shared? You may express it a different way, perhaps, or you just say, "Yep, I agree with everything. We're on the same page."
I think we're on the same page. I don't know if she sees the Sunday law as this bookend in the same way that I've expressed it, or she just sees it as July as a singular event.
I don't think she spoke to that issue.
Yeah.
So it's only based upon what she did speak to that I'm asking. I'm not trying to squeeze out hidden things that I haven't been said.
So with regards to what she has said, I agree
Only
with
in
what
those
she
four,
said.
only in those
Oh,
four studies, not.
Yeah. Yeah. If I remember her studies correctly, yes. There's nothing I disagree with.
Okay, thank you.
Can you explain what the seventh being Egypt? That's a question that was written in the chat. Could you elaborate um, what that question is about, Susan? Can you explain the seventh being Egypt?
Hi, I don't know if I've said it correctly, but in one of your studies, you was talking about Egypt and how you used it interchangeably. And I know one of them was either the sixth kingdom or the seventh kingdom, and I didn't really understand what you were saying, so I wanted you to explain a bit more.
I don't know what I've said. I think, just tell me if not. I think that was in the context of 273. Was it?
Yes, definitely. Yes.
When Egypt sends ambassadors to Rome. So in I took this straight from Elder Tess. And in this story of Egypt and Rome, we have Beneventum, and then we have the Sunday Law. And Elder Tess, when she did the study in Arkansas in 2018, she puts the UN here, and then she puts the papacy here. Because this is the king of the north. Yeah, that's the king of the north. But as she goes on in her studies, and we as a movement become a bit more aware that the UN is not the seventh kingdom of Bible prophecy, it's the USA. She phrases it as the USA over the UN, or nations plural. I've tried to demonstrate that I don't think that the seventh kingdom is nations plural. It's one singular nation, and that nation is the USA. So where she puts UN, yeah, because she gets this idea of the UN from the dragon, that historically we've taught that the dragon in that threefold union is the UN, and that's the nation that rules the world. But at least from my understanding, that nation that rules the world isn't the UN, it's the seventh kingdom, and that seventh kingdom is the USA. When you go to Revelation 17, not 17, 13, and you have this point in time, John is going to describe the lamb-like beast here, and then a dragon here, in a simple fashion. And this beast is going to transition into this beast, but it's the same beast. It doesn't become a different beast. It's the same thing going through a different phase, much like pagan Rome in the legs and then pagan Rome in the feet. And so when Elder Tess put UN here as the seventh kingdom, I tried making the argument that she was wrong. But I'll give her credit in that she shifted her position and put the USA over the UN. But in reality, I don't see the USA over the UN or the UN over the USA. I just see it as the USA full stop, as the dragon in that threefold union. And then with regards to the papacy, I can't remember why she said the papacy in the first place, because here at Beneventum, the king of the north that we speak about is the USA in its relation to the king of the south. It's not the papacy in that history, in Raphia, Panium, etc. So I can't remember why she switches from USA to papacy. Yeah,
Okay,
but can I finish and then you can
I was
carry
just going to help. It doesn't matter. It's all right.
on. You can correct me once I finish. But in this story, Egypt comes into the story not because they want to deal with the king of the south. They've already been dealt with by the king of the north. Egypt comes into the story because Egypt has their own problems that they want. They have their own wars that they're fighting with Seleucus, with taking over the world, if you want to call it that. And so they need an ally to do that. And so this Egypt and the connection between these two, the first point that I was making in those studies is one, the dragon is the USA, the dragon isn't the UN. And the second is that this doesn't change. The king of the north here is the king of the north here. Rome is here, and then Rome is down here as well. And then the third point is that I can't remember what the third point is. But yeah, Natalie, you wanted to say something, correct me or something.
I wasn't correcting you. You wasn't sure why Elder Tess mentions the papacy. I
Mm-hmm.
see what you've drawn there, but it makes sense. But I think it was due to saying that from Panium Beneventum that you see that of Panium, you see the rise of the papacy, and she said at that point at the 273 was diplomatic relationships because you saw it in the fight with Pyrrhus. So that's why the way papacy came from was the diplomatic relationship with Rome. I don't know.
Yeah, I know the application she made, but I don't know why she switched from USA to papacy when
Yeah.
it's the same Rome. Does that answer you, Susan? I tried to, but I don't know if I did. So basically, the reason why I say Egypt dragon is because Aldates made that application, and I just followed through with the steps. But even regardless of Aldates making that original application, I think you can show what Egypt was trying to do in that history was reflective of what the dragon does as a symbol. Okay. Right. So, Charity, I can see you unmuted. I don't know if that's a question or a comment or something before we close.
Hi, I want to try and I don't know if you still have the lines from the where you were making the time setting and all.
Mm, mm-hmm.
Yeah. So because well, unfortunately, I haven't managed to go through everything.
Mm-hmm.
But I just wanted to ask something
Yeah.
in connection with that I don't know if it's my understanding that's wrong but I'll just say what was in my mind when from how I've understood the projections with the with the time. I don't know if it's the numbers, whatever that you're projecting, the numbers that we project from one point to another. There's usually like a story, a thread of a story that we have, and with that we then have a time or a significant number, or I don't know what to call it, like like 220 is a number that we get from the idea of restoration and all. But when we look at the whole issue, the story behind it, like for example, from wherever you're starting that story and where you are projecting it to, it's telling a story that's connected with that number.
Mm-hmm.
And usually that we don't start by projecting a number, we start by following a thread of a story. And sorry, I'm struggling to speak. When we make a thread of that story or tell that story, and then that projection of that number becomes like a I don't know if I can say a cherry on top or something that confirms that story that you have laid out, that becomes the foundation. And I was just wondering if what you had been doing with the projection is in a similar way, or you just came from a perspective of just picking up a year and then you see something interesting and then you make a projection. I don't know if that makes sense.
So I don't know if you were on when I was going through the summary. This is how I understand time setting, at least, is that the primary mode of Bible study is compare and contrast, is line upon line. That's your most robust, it's your most defendable means in which you can understand truth. And so when we time set, it's not necessarily the number that's the genius in it. It's that you're going to get a number to connect two histories. So for instance, 1898 and 2024. It's going to point you in the direction of where you can compare and contrast. And then that's where the genius comes in, if you want to call it that. That now you're going to get a year, 1898, and 2024, and compare and contrast the issues that are taking place then and the issues that are taking place in 2024. And in 1898, I go through how America changes its nature. The nature of America fundamentally changes with its relationship to the world. And at the Sunday law, that's something that we expect. We expect Alexander to stand up and be a world empire. Greece is spoken about in a way that we don't speak about other nations, at least in Daniel. And that's what happened in 1898. America becomes this imperial nation now. And it's similar, I think, to what we do with 2014 and 1888, is that you have this hook or this thing that's going to connect two histories, and now you're going to compare and contrast those two histories that have been connected by this link. And you compare and contrast the history of 1888 as a step to a national Sunday law, and 2014 and the Sunday law, etc. But it's not the be all and end all, just that you have a number and you connect it to something. It's a means to an end. It's not the end in and of itself. I think that's how you use numeric symbology.
Okay, so what starts first? Is it comparing the two histories or the number?
I'm suggesting it's the number that points you in the right direction, or that points you in a direction of where to start looking. And then once you've found somewhere to start looking, you compare and contrast. And then you already have a bank of information with regards to what you expect at the Sunday law. And then you compare and contrast the histories that you've connected.
Okay, so when we make the projection, we are making it from which point? From how do we go through the process of making the projection? Are we starting from 2024, and then we go back wherever the number lands, then we look for something, or we start from 1888 and then we throw a number and then it comes to 2024 and 2014, and then we we just
Well,
look for something there. Yeah.
so that's what I was saying. It's not that you're looking for arbitrary things, is that you
Okay.
already have a bank of information with regards to what's happening at a waymark. So you have a knowledge store of these are the things that take place at the Sunday law. And you want to understand, okay, am I living in the Sunday law history? So you go to a prior history and you look for events that are taking place in those events, and you look around and you're like, yeah, that's what's happening. And so then you have your marker that these are comparable.
Okay.
Charity,
Yeah.
can I ask you a question? You're given two scenarios. You've said 2024 and work backwards using numbers. And then you've said 1888, look forward with some numbers. You're given sort of both scenarios. Do you have a problem with that? Taking set numbers, because we've got a set of numbers, mostly derived from the 2520 in some kind of shape or form. And then I know correctly, Curtis doesn't want to use the term numerology, but you just take those numbers and you go to some X date, whatever that date is, because you heard something happen in a particular date, whether you go backwards or forwards, and then you just apply those numbers, and then you do some kind of test against it. Do you find an objection to doing it like that?
Okay, I guess my struggle that I'm having is that how like what can become an anchor for me for not like what would be the anchor that helps me to not just, like, for example, if I think that 2025 is the Sunday law, and then I take the 126 and put it back, and then I land in a certain year, and then I start looking around that time period and to try and confirm what that 2025 is a Sunday law. I guess that's where I'm coming from. I'm trying to think, can I just do that, like?
And what do you think the answer to your own question is? If you do that, go to 2025, go 126 back, you come to a specific year, you go into Wikipedia or Google, and you search through the year for a whole heap of events. What's your safety to stop you entering into fanaticism or something? Yeah, because I think you know the answer to your own question, don't you?
Yes, for me, I felt like in that there's no anchor.
Yeah, but Kurt is saying there is an anchor, and you're saying there isn't.
That's what I'm trying to understand, I guess.
Sure.
Because in my mind, I'm thinking.
What's 2025? The Sunday law. Pardon? 2025 is the Sunday law. You're going to go 126 back, come to whatever year that is. I can't do the maths of it.
99.
Sorry?
1899.
1899, and you're going to look in 1899 and see if you can see anything that symbolically, in some shape or form, you could create a Sunday law event out of, and then you see if it meets not just the 2025 year, but what you see happening in 2025 or what you anticipate happening. So you compare the 2 years or the 2 events. You think that's sketchy to do that or unsafe?
For me, I feel it's a bit sketchy. I guess I guess for me, maybe it's because I don't understand how the whole numerology thing works, or I don't have faith. I don't know.
You do, because you explained it to us. You go 2025, work back 126, which you know is a legitimate number to use, get to 1899, so you know how it works. and then you just look at the year 1899 and see if anything happened. And if it did, you say, I've got it.
So 2025 is the Sunday law. And I'm thinking, to me, I can do the same for every other year. Like, what can stop me from doing that about
I bet Curtis is going to
2023
say you can't.
or 2026 or
Curtis is going to say you
2027?
can't. Try it.
Yeah.
Not just 1 year. Try the 7 or 8. I can't remember how many numbers he's got there. It's at the bottom of the screen. Try doing it with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 dates. See if it'll work out. I think his argument is try it and you'll see it won't work. You can get 1 or 2 to fit.
Why?
But the fit has to be a really good fit.
I guess that's where I'm struggling. I guess even
Are you struggling with 9 things fitting well?
No, it's not the fitting well. I feel like, like with the whole, like what all the tests used to speak about, the issue of the Ramsey theory and how you can, if you look for something in a certain place, you can find it. And what can stop me from looking for connections about 2026 of a Sunday law?
I'll tell you what stops you.
And
I can answer that one on behalf of Curtis. The 2520 stops you doing that. What prevents you going into Ramsey theory is that if you don't have the numbers, you can do what you want. The numbers prevent you. They're the safety net to stop you going into fanaticism.
So you're saying it's because of the 126?
No,
the
2520.
The
2520 and all of its subset numbers. That's the one when you do, upon the testimony of 9, I think it says there, that you have an assurance that you're not doing Ramsey theory.
Okay, so why pick 2024 in particular? Why not 2025 for the same thing?
Because we're living in 2024. And maybe he did 25 and 26 and for the next 10 years and he couldn't come up with anything. But when he did 2024, this is what he found. I think that's what he's saying.
Yeah.
I don't understand the subjects. Like, what's COVID got to do with everything? And that's my issue.
Just separate to that, I don't know if he's explained that before. Catherine did a similar study, which is why I asked him the question, and she did 2025. She went 2025, I don't know if she did all 9, but she did a fair few of them to look, and she couldn't. She went to 2024, and I don't know if she picks the same ones, same issues, but when she did, she just saw, I'm going to say 4, because I don't think she did 9, 4 natural fits that didn't have to be squeezed out. You didn't have to do playing with events. They just had a really nice fit for her. I'm not saying my position for her, but when she tried it with 2025, she would have had to force things to get them to work, and it made her feel uncomfortable. But 24 just naturally fitted, and I think that's all that Curtis is saying. But your objection is
maybe it's because I've never done it.
You should do it. It's quite cathartic to make you feel good. You just take it, your question is it's an unsafe methodology to take numbers and work back because you think it's some kind of reverse engineering, and I think you're saying this is just numerology, and however I don't know what numerical symbology means, but it's saying that's subtly something different.
No, okay. What my issue was, I guess, like I'm saying, maybe it's because I have never done it before. So, and I'm trying to understand how he was doing it, and I was thinking, do we just take a year and then we just throw numbers? Because to me, it felt like
you take
just
a year
looking for things.
And you don't throw any numbers. Using loaded words like that is unhelpful to yourself, not to anyone else. You don't throw numbers. You take a year, which you have, you have a gut feeling or someone said it's significant, then you carefully apply specific numbers, and then you test them. You stress test them.
Okay, so we don't necessarily have to have like a thread of a story. We can just
Yes, because once you get to 1804, now you have to have a story that 1804 can point you to that. You don't have to have a thread that takes you 1804 and 10 different dates that brings you to 2024. You just take the beginning and the end points. You don't have to have a thread all the way through. If you had one, it'd be really nice.
okay. So maybe the issue is I've not properly understood how we used to do it back then, because from what I thought,
When is
I
the back
thought
then?
okay, I'm thinking of the first days I got into the movement and when we used to do studies about the I'm not talking about your studies, Elder Paminda, because those days I didn't really watch them. When we would talk about, for example, ancient Israel, and I'm trying to think of something. When would no, sorry. Let me think about it first. But I thought in my mind that we would have like a story that we have threaded through, and then you then see a number that's projected from that place to another place that pretty much confirms what you um, have studied, as opposed to the other way around. That's what I thought.
If you can do it one way, can you not do it the other way?
That's what I did. That's what I didn't think would be safe.
I would have thought it's safer to do it the back way that Curtis is doing it instead of the other way.
Pardon?
I would have thought the way he's doing it is safer. There are dozens of people, well, maybe not dozens, a fair few people that said 2024 is a significant year.
Mm-hmm.
And so someone said that, several people do, he just works backward and he says, well, look at that. As opposed to taking some random year and then projecting forward to a random date.
Okay. So we're basically saying that the 2520 gives us the right to do that. You can't, because okay, like I was saying, you're saying I shouldn't say it's just any number, but it's a particular number that gives us the license to do that.
I'll just say this one point, and I'm gonna let Curtis finish because I don't want to speak on the You just said, I think you just said, you can use the 2520 to go forward. You think that's legitimate. And Curtis has said, I use the 2520 to go backwards, and you say, oh, that I'm not sure if that's legitimate. And to me,
yes, but that's because I told you how I was thinking.
Yeah, okay, but what you're saying is you feel it's legitimate to get the 2520 to project forward. You have no problems with that. Just to make sure I understood you correctly.
No, I actually, when I spoke about the 1888, I said, how do you just take a number from 1888 and then you just go to 2014, or you from 2014 to 1888? So I was speaking about both.
I thought you said in the past, back in the days, ...
Mhm.
I thought you were inferring that's how we used to do it. 18,
No.
whatever number is, we walked. Well, how did we do any time setting in the past?
Like I'm saying, how I thought things happened is that we have first we thread a story, we have a line before we start projecting numbers, and then we can then have a number that we see or we project after as a way of confirming what is
Sure.
already
How do you get the start date? How do
established.
you get the first waymark on your line?
You go to a verse and you read that this happened at this particular time, and then you go to history and you look for that date.
So you have an event and you have a date for that.
Mm-hmm. And then you
And
thread the story of all the things that happened from that date up until at a point, like let's say, for example, with the captivity of Babylon, and then you are going to, after you have understood that story, then you'll then see, oh, okay, there's this, maybe let's say 220. That's a significant number that we've seen in the Bible that speaks about restoration, for example, and we are seeing that between this date that we already have and that date, there's a 220. So it's basically like doubling down on the same story that we have.
okay, I'll let Curtis finish. I promise I'll stop speaking.
Can I just say something about the subjects?
Yeah.
I was just wondering, like, I understand that if you get a thread, it's wonderful because you got the numbers and the thread. But I'm just wondering, I can't remember if I was on this study. I think I probably was, or I watched it, sorry. But I'm just wondering, like, things like pandemic, what's that mean in 2024? COVID, what does that mean in 2024? What do they all mean in 2024? I don't think you went into that.
Well, I just took the concept at a basic level that on the line of the Levites, not Levites, sorry, Nethinims. Sorry. On the line of the Nethinims, Sunday law to COP is Jacob's time of trouble and plagues. In the same way we do for 2019 to 2021 on the line of the priests. And so I was careful in saying, I don't know, I'm not saying that we expect a pandemic between 2024 and the close of probation. It was just identifying that it has the markers for plagues associated with the Sunday law going forward.
Okay, thank you.
There it is.
Blessing?
Could I say something quickly?
Yeah.
I'm on the move, so I can't really talk much, but I just wanted to comment on the legitimacy or the lack of it of projecting forward versus projecting backward. I think we have accepted in this movement for a long time that numbers tell stories. So they are parables because parables are stories. And numbers, as long as they follow all the rules of parable methodology, have some, we can rely on them. They have a level of safety. So one of the properties of a parable, it's not the only one, but is this idea of beginning and end, or alpha and omega. You know, so we take the 126, using 1863 and 1888 as examples, because those are established ones that I don't think any of us question. We look at the beginning, which is 1863 or 1888, and look at the end, 1989, 2014. And what alpha and omega, which is, if I could say, a property of a parable, dictates, is that the beginning and the end must be the same. So if they are the same or equivalent, it means you can legitimately project forward as you could project backward. So I just wanted to say that.
Yep. Thank you for your comment.
So basically, sorry, Curtis. So basically, what we are saying is that the numbers that basically the 2520, okay, it's a number that's telling us a story, right? There's other numbers also that tell us stories, And with how we have studied or understood things in the movement, we have seen that we are able to make projections with that number or those numbers, and wherever they're going to land. Okay, from that point that we made that projection, they are going to point us to something at that point or time that helps us to understand more about that story.
Yeah. That's how I see it. And you have
Okay.
safety in not just one thing that you use, it's repeating that process several times until you, as I said, you can look back at your chest of information of what you expect at this waymark and then look at what you're seeing and say, okay, I've ticked off about 10 things. This must be it.
Okay. I guess, like I said before, it's something that I have never tried. And one of the reasons is because I always felt maybe I might do it wrong. Like, what would be the foundation of me just picking up a date and then just projecting a number? Like, where's that coming from?
You
So
learn a lot of
that's what I
history
was.
doing it, and so I'd suggest do it for random years, and then you just learn about a lot of history in the process.
Thank you.
Okay. If that's it, I think we can close. It's been a while, and to be honest, I'm quite tired.
Sorry, Gedges, could I say one more thing? Sorry.
Yeah.
A quick one. This is to charity. You will not get disfellowship by the movement, even if you make a doctrinal mistake or error. So don't worry, do it.
Yeah, exactly. Just do it. Okay, if that's the end, let's close with a word of prayer. Dear God, thank you, I guess, ending on that last point, that we all belong to a movement where we can learn together without fear of persecution, without fear of retribution, that we are all part of this journey learning together, and you give us the space to do that, to learn and to grow in our education. I pray and ask that as we navigate where we are in history, we can have faith that the path in which you've led us on thus far can guide us on the path that you're going to lead us. As has been said, you declared the end from the beginning. And so it's my prayer that as we continue in our studies to understand where we are and what it is you're trying to do here at the end of the world, we can rest assured that you are in control and that there is an intervener in our lives. I pray for the week ahead. I pray that you may bless each and every one of us in a special way with our wants, desires, and wishes. This is my prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.